While many Republican lawmakers are going after the president's decision to withdraw U.S. troops from northern Syria, one is defending, even applauding the president's move. He joins me now, author of the new book, The Case Against Socialism, Republican Senator from Kentucky, Rand Paul. Senator, good morning. Before we get to the book, I know you support the president's move to withdraw troops. What do you think about him imposing sanctions on Turkey? Because it hasn't caused Turkey to back down in any way.
Right. Well, I think the big picture is we have to decide when we go to war and when we should involve our young men and women in the middle of harm's way. Under the Constitution, we're supposed to vote on that. Congress is supposed to declare war. The problem in this situation is so messy, it's like, who do you want to declare war on? The bad actor right now seems to be Erdogan in Turkey, but they're our NATO ally, and we're actually sworn to defend them if they're attacked. They're allied with the Free Syrian Army, which we supported for 7 years, and we're allied against Assad. On the other side of the war, we have Assad, the Russians, and Iran. Are we going to side with them? And then you have the Kurds caught in the middle of this. And interestingly, I think the irony of this whole thing is everybody's worried about the Kurds and the demise of the Kurds. The irony may be that when the Kurds finally become aligned with Assad, which seems to be happening in the last 24 hours, that it may be their best chance for actually having a semi-autonomous region of Syria that is Kurdish. It's what happened in Iraq and which I hope will happen in Syria, but it's not going to happen unless the Turks actually feel comfortable with Syria controlling their own sovereignty and not allowing incursions from Syria into Turkey. And I think that's what Turkey's most worried about.
So it sounds like you're saying to me, why don't we let this thing play out and see where the chips fall? But Lindsey Graham has said making a mistake like that is what we saw happen in the last administration, and you could potentially let something like ISIS resurge. We know that we've already seen in the last 48 hours an ISIS flag being raised again. And for Americans who are saying, I'm not paying attention to what's happening 7,000 miles away, they do remember what happened on 9/11 right here in New York City and in Washington.
Yeah. I would say that Lindsey Graham's been wrong about almost every foreign policy decision of the last 2 decades. He was wrong about the Iraq War. The Iraq War was a mistake and made Iran stronger, allowed more chaos, more instability, and more terrorism. He was wrong about the war in Libya. It led to more chaos and more terrorism. He's wrong about this. He's been wrong about the Syrian war from the beginning because the neocons, Lindsey Graham and others, and actually many liberals like Hillary Clinton, they actually all supported the Sunni extremists against Assad. I'm not so sure that the Sunni extremists taking over Syria would have been better than Assad. I'm not a fan of Assad, but sometimes maybe you have two evils and you really don't have to pick sides. That's what we're supposed to vote on and have a debate, a big public debate about when we go to war. And I don't see a national interest over there. And the only way you determine if there is one, let's have a big spirited national debate, a vote in Congress, and decide whether we're sending our kids to war. But 50 soldiers over there were a deterrent to nothing. And in the end, I think it was a real good move to get those 50 soldiers out of the way of an onslaught of Turkish troops.
And you've got no concerns about a resurgence of ISIS?
Well, I think we always have to be concerned about terrorism, but I think it's a misguided notion that we have to occupy acreage everywhere around the world. So, like, we have to occupy Afghanistan to keep terrorists from coming back. Well, hell, even with us there, a third of Afghanistan or more is now occupied by the Taliban. But if that's your theory, that we have to be everywhere to stop terrorism, well, then we should occupy Libya, Mali, and that's kind of what we've been doing. But even that, we only do halfway because Africa's so big. We have troops in 50 or 55 nations, and yet we occupy small little swaths. But I think sometimes we think we can tamp down terrorism, but maybe sometimes we excite terrorism by the people being unhappy that we're there.
All right, let's talk Capitol Hill, where you are. Yesterday, Fiona Hill was there. She reportedly spoke to your colleagues about Rudy Giuliani, his attempt to create his own shadow policy on Ukraine. Does that bother you, shadow policy from Rudy Giuliani?
Yeah, I don't really have any inside information as to what Giuliani's been doing in Ukraine. I would say that when you look at the Ukraine situation and you look at the accusations of the president somehow being involved with withholding aid, I think the one thing that's true in Washington is that everybody seems to be trying to tell Ukraine what to do. We had 3 U.S. senators tell Ukraine that if they didn't keep investigating Trump, that they would vote to withhold their aid. We had a Democrat senator just a month ago fly over to Ukraine and say if they investigated Hunter Biden, he would vote to withhold their aid. So I think both parties have been doing this. And frankly, I think we've got no money to send to them anyway. I mean, we have to borrow the money from China to send it to Ukraine. It involves us in other people's wars. And ultimately, I think leads to really messy situations with loss of American lives.
Are you interested in understanding further what it is that Rudy Giuliani, a private citizen, is doing? Reuters reporting that he was recently paid $500,000 from the company that was started by the 2 Ukrainian guys who were arrested last week. Are you not curious?
Well, that's almost as much as Hunter Biden made. Hunter Biden made $600,000 from a Ukrainian company. So if we want to investigate Rudy Giuliani's financial dealings, by all means do it. But at the same time, you should, if you want to be fair, investigate Hunter Biden's economic dealings in the Ukraine as well.
Does that mean we should be looking deeper into how Jared Kushner's family got foreign money for 666 Fifth Avenue, how Ivanka Trump got 13 trademarks from the Chinese government, how she was able to expand her brand since the president took office? I mean, giddy up. Let's do it.
If we want to go down the road of the politics of self-destruction of everybody, criminalize all politicians on both sides of the aisle and go after their family, yes, we can do that. But both sides are doing that. Nobody really should excuse themselves and say, oh, we're holier than thou and Trump is evil, instead of saying, you know what, it looks like there's been a lot of self-dealings throughout history. And if we want to go down that route, we want to criminalize politics, we can do it. But I think in the end, the American people are going to say, well, shouldn't we do it fairly? You know, if the president was threatening their aid and so was Joe Biden, shouldn't we sort of address that in a fair and objective and equal way?
Then take the president out of this. Is it appropriate for any sitting president to ask a foreign government to do work investigating a political opponent, even if it wasn't President Trump?
I guess you would have to also ask, is it appropriate for Hunter Biden to make $600,000 a year from a company that his dad was involved with?
Sir, you're not answering my question, because to that point, I would say to you, is it appropriate for President Trump's sons to be promoting their business overseas? I'm saying, take the president out of the equation. Should any sitting president...
Yeah, it's exactly the same question, though. So if we're going to say we're going to go after and investigate Giuliani and the president and all this stuff that they've had to do with aid, if you want to be objective and fair, you'd have to also do the same for Hunter Biden. And yet all the news outlets say, oh, Hunter Biden's been cleared and there's been investigation. There's been no investigation.
He's not an elected official, sir.
Most Americans think that making $50,000 a month for a young man that's had no experience in international relations is really unusual. His dad went to Ukraine 13 times, and he's making $50,000 a month. That's a lot of money. Most Americans say that doesn't pass the smell test.
Most Americans would also say it's strange that Bill Barr's son-in-law works at the White House, that Rudy Giuliani's son works at the White House, that the president's daughter and son-in-law work at the White House, and that Bill Barr's daughter works at the Treasury. So most Americans would say, you're right.
The president's family's not paid. I think Giuliani's son probably makes less than $100,000 a year. So I don't think anybody's getting rich being paid by government. That's all on the up and up. When you work for a corporation that's owned by a Ukrainian oligarch and you get $50,000 a month, something doesn't pass the smell test. And I think Americans are going to make a judgment on that, even if the media excuses it and doesn't investigate it. But if we want to go after Trump, I think you have to equally look at the Bidens. You have to equally look at the Democrats who have also been threatening Ukraine's aid and say, how is this different and how is it the same?
Then quickly, before we move on, you're right. The Trump family isn't necessarily being paid for working in the White House. Do you take issue with all of the foreign governments? Actually, Turkey paid more than any other foreign government to Trump hotels. And the Trump family is making money off their businesses. That Mar-a-Lago is where events are held. The Doral down in Florida is where political events are held. Do you take any issue with that, sir?
I think it would be a problem if people were paying above the normal rates. But if you have a public facility and that's your business, I don't think because you win office, you know, what if I own the Paul Hotel down the street and I charge the normal rates and people come to that? Is that a contribution? You'd have to then tell anybody that owns a hotel or owns a restaurant or owns a retail store that they can't do business unless it's something above the normal. If they're charging somebody 10 times the rate or they're not sleeping in the hotel and they're charging rates, that would be a problem. If you're coming and paying the market rate, I think that's part of what business is allowing people who are in government to also be in business.
All right, we're going to move on. But just to be clear then, if any of those hotel rooms are booked and no one is sleeping in them, you do take an issue with that?
Yeah, that would be a problem, obviously. If people are booking hotel rooms, paying large amounts of money and not staying there, I think anybody would think that that's a problem.
All right, I will follow up because Politico has reported that that very thing has happened. Let's talk about your book, though. In your book, The case against socialism, you're arguing that people who are complaining about income inequality, they're not looking at it in the right way. And I want to pull a piece of what you wrote. You wrote, part of the problem in examining unequal incomes is that we fail to acknowledge that it may be more important to analyze what you can buy with your income rather than the actual dollar amount in your paycheck. Here's the issue. What if the dollar amount in your paycheck isn't enough money to feed your family, to get medicine, to put your kid through school?
If you look at the poorest in our society, they actually do as well as the middle class in most societies. If you look at the economic pie, our economic pie has doubled 8 times in the last 200 years. So our economic pie is growing and growing and growing. The one interesting thing about income inequality, if that's what we're really concerned with and we want everybody to be equal, they have almost no income inequality in Pakistan and Ethiopia, and people would be welcome to move there. If you look at income inequality in developed countries like ours, you actually find that the more income inequality, the more economic growth. So I think people are misguided in the sense that it shouldn't be that your friend makes 10 times more than you. It should be about how much you make. So we can equalize things where everybody makes, $30,000 a year is what the poor make and $100,000 of the rich. Or would you rather live in a society where the poor make $60,000 and the rich make $10 million? See, it really shouldn't be about concern about what your friends or neighbors make. It should be concern about what the well-being of the poorest among us. And I think if you look at the poorest among us, we're doing much better job at it under capitalism than they do under socialism anywhere in the world.
The answer doesn't have to be capitalism or socialism. Whether you're hearing from top CEOs from the Business Roundtable, if you're looking at the latest book from Salesforce founder Mark Benioff, the issue is capitalism isn't working for enough people. When you see the average worker only increasing their pay 12% over the last 30 years and CEO pay going up almost 1,000%, it's that inequality. Right. So does the answer have to be capitalism or socialism? I'm hard pressed to find many people who say it's socialism all the way.
Yeah, I know, but if you're running as a socialist, you might get socialism. I mean, Bernie Sanders is running as a socialist. AOC runs as a socialist, the Democrat Socialists of America. If you read their website, they are for government ownership of industry. So you have to ask yourself, if the government's going to own the industry, how do they get it? What if there's resistance? Do they come with billy clubs and truncheons? Do they come with weapons? Do they imprison the owners? How do they get the ownership of the factories into government hands? And has it ever worked? When it's happened in the past, throughout the 20th century, we find genocide and famine. Famine to the tune of hundreds of millions of people dying. So we really shouldn't be blithely saying, oh, socialism be fine, or maybe we go halfway to socialism. We should look at the ramifications of when we have tried socialism.
Do you consider Medicare, Medicaid, Social Security forms of socialism?
I'd say they're more welfarism, and so there is an in-between, and the United States is kind of in-between. But when Bernie says that he wants socialism like Denmark, Denmark's prime minister responds and says, Bernie, pipe down. We're not socialist. We're open for business. In fact, economic ratings show that Scandinavia actually is freer than many of the countries around the world. They have private property, private stock exchange, and here's the real irony.
Yes, but they have extraordinarily high taxes.
Yeah. Well, they do, but here's the rub. Bernie and AOC say you can have all the stuff they have in Scandinavia by just taxing the top 1%. In Scandinavia, they tax the working class and the middle class, and the vast bulk of the taxes come from the working class and the middle class. If you look at the working class, they pay a 25% sales tax, and the middle class has a 60% income tax starting at $60,000. So it's the opposite of what American socialists are saying. It's not socialism, it's welfarism, but it's also paid for with massive taxes. See, we keep asking Elizabeth Warren, are you going to raise taxes on the middle class? And she's waffling on the answer. The answer is, if you want all this so-called free stuff, all this welfare state stuff, you can have it, but it's not free, and the middle class has to pay massive taxes.
Elizabeth Warren has not identified herself as a socialist or a democratic socialist. She has said she supported free markets. What Elizabeth Warren did after the financial crisis was take a much closer look at banks and put together the CFPB, whether it was the Volcker Rule or Dodd-Frank. Neither were looking to ban trading in the public markets. What they were looking to do is put guardrails on to protect individuals.
I think Elizabeth Warren is much smarter and much more coy about her belief in large government. But if you look at the actual policies, Her policies and Bernie's party policies are not too much different.
Like
they both are
what
for,
policy
well,
do you mean specifically from Elizabeth Warren?
Well, one of the biggest would probably be Medicare for All, which is estimated to cost $60 trillion. So how are we going to pay for that? And so Elizabeth Warren has to answer the same question that the avowed socialists have to answer, and that is, how do you pay for a $60 trillion program without taxing the middle class? And this is an important question even for the left to ask. You need to be asking this because everybody pays these taxes, and we have to figure out how, if we want Elizabeth Warren, how we're going to pay for the massive $60 trillion program that she's proposed for us.
And do you think the 2017 corporate tax cut that you supported has paid for itself? Because last I looked, that federal deficit, it surged to the highest level it's been in 12 years.
Well, the interesting thing is when you look at cutting the tax rates, revenue actually has gone up. So since the tax cut, tax revenues have gone up. So we have lower rates, but we actually have more taxes have come in. The reason the deficit has widened, and Republicans are responsible as well as Democrats, is because we kept spending on the military and on social welfare. Spending has gone up alarming fashion. We've exceeded all the budget caps. But if you look at the tax cuts, the cutting of the rates, tax revenues have actually gone up.
Hey there, I'm Chris Hayes from MSNBC. Thanks for watching MSNBC on YouTube. If you want to keep up to date with the videos we're putting out, you can click subscribe just below me or click over on this list to see lots of other great videos.